Ladies and gentlemen, welcome aboard the Wright Flyer. As always, this is your captain, Randy Wright speaking, and I'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for choosing to fly over the friendly airwaves with us here at our state-of-the-art radio program, Radio Aviation Excellence, the Wright Flyer. Well, folks, without any further ado, let's go ahead and delve into the topic for this program. It's been crazy. It's been real crazy. This story that came pretty close to home here in Texas, where a synagogue was essentially taken over by a hostage taker, and a tense standoff had ensued for hours throughout Saturday. And usually with stories of this nature, you don't get to say that there's a good outcome that comes out of it. But this has been one of those rare situations where, indeed, a good outcome did occur. And I'm happy for that. Indeed, we should all be happy for that. Because there's been a lot of crazy things going on. A lot of divisiveness, a lot of identity politics, a lot of nonsense that has been designed to drive a wedge into the body politique of the land of the free and the home of the brave by those who are serving an ulterior motive, and for those who have an overarching agenda that is deleterious and designed to destroy the United States, that it's good, that there's something happy to report. And so let's go ahead and take a look at what happened. This hostage situation ended with all hostages alive and safe, which is fantastic. However, the suspect in it, the one who carried this out, did live up to one promise when he said that he was going to die. This article coming from Fox News by Adam Sables and Dom Calico. 3 remaining hostages at a Texas synagogue were out and alive and safe, ending an ordeal that began hours earlier, according to a Twitter message late Saturday from Governor Greg Abbott, in which he stated, "Prayers answered. All hostages are out alive and safe." Not long before the governor's message, a loud bang and the sound of gunfire were heard at the congregation of Beth Israel in Colleyville, near Fort Worth, as authorities worked to free the hostages. The subject is deceased. And that's according to Michael Miller, who is the Colleyville chief of police. And it's interesting that he is deceased, because it sounds to me, based off of statements that he had made during the time that the Facebook live stream of the synagogue, because they were broadcasting for the congregation, it was being basically shared to the greater extent or wider extent of the community. He was heard to say that he was going to kill himself and that he would not survive this. But there were some interesting terror connections with it as well, demanding the freeing of a terrorist suspect who had essentially been arrested back in 2010. So we also have learned that the FBI said that the suspect was focused on a single issue not directly related to the Jewish community. No, of course, it was related to this terror person. But the interesting thing is also that more than 200 law enforcement officials had worked on the case Saturday, including the hostage situation negotiators of both the local and I believe also the federal. Just about 2 hours earlier, a single hostage had been freed, unharmed, giving authorities hope that the situation would end without bloodshed. Authorities and others were worried about a repeat of such tragedies as the Tree of Life massacre in Pittsburgh back in October of 2018, where 11 people were killed, or the Poway, California synagogue shooting near San Diego in 2019, where there was one fatality. So here they get into how the situation began. Many hours earlier, a Texas SWAT team had responded to the congregation of Beth Israel after a suspect entered the house of worship and took hostages during services that were being live-streamed on the internet. The suspect was said to be a supporter of Aifa Siddiqui, a Pakistani neuroscientist who was sentenced to 86 years in prison in 2010 for attempting to murder and assault U.S. military personnel, and was being held at Federal Medical Center Carswell at a prison in Fort Worth. Siddiqui is also referred to as Lady Al-Qaeda. Isn't that nice? Why is it that we always run into this situation with a certain religion? Not all of the religion, but a certain religion. Why is that? And why is it that in this era of identity politics, we have those that are so afraid to label these things for what they are? It's going to be interesting to see how the salivating legacy media is going to attempt to spin this, but let's continue. As the situation began, Colleyville police wrote on Twitter that all residents in the immediate area of the synagogue were being evacuated. In addition, police posted an update at 1:20 p.m. stating the situation was ongoing and advised people to avoid the area. According to ABC Communist News, the hostages included the rabbi of the synagogue, and he had been identified by the Dallas Morning Communist News as Rabbi Charlie Citron Walker. In a statement, Colleyville Police Department Sergeant Dara Nelson said the department received the first call at 10:41 a.m. As the day progressed, Colleyville Police, the FBI's Dallas Field Office, the Texas Department of Public Safety, so your Texas Rangers and state troopers, and the North Tarrant Regional SWAT Team and other agencies responded to the scene. It's interesting to note also, what I haven't seen here, but I'm sure it's going to turn up, the suspect that was behind all of this also claimed to have bags of explosives. So I know that the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives was also involved in this incident. Law enforcement officials said no injuries were reported, and the FBI crisis negotiators had been in communication with the suspect throughout the ordeal. I know that they got him food, too. That was another thing I recall when I was first learning about this entire situation. The first hostage was released with no injuries shortly after 5 p.m. Central Time, according to Nelson. This man will be reunited with his family as soon as possible, and he does not require medical attention. During the live stream, here's where it gets really interesting. The congregation had a Facebook live stream up on its Facebook page for a service that had started 3 hours prior to the suspect's arrival. The live stream was soon disabled, but not before a man could be heard reportedly saying, "I will die." Or, also, "I'm going to die at the end of this, all right? Are you listening? I am going to die, okay? So don't cry for me," the voice said. Here we have one clip of the police and what they were saying. Well, we would have. I don't know. For some reason, that's... Oh, because the live stream had finished. Anyway, they were discussing all that had happened. What is interesting is that the White House was supposedly closely monitoring this. I really don't care. It seems that the situation was handled without their help, and that we didn't need their help. We also know that the U.S. ambassador to Israel, Tom Nides, tweeted about the incident. I am closely monitoring reports of the hostage situation at the congregation Beth Israel in Texas, where the community is gathered for Shabbat services, praying for an immediate and safe end. Fortunately, it did wind up being a safe end. It did. And again, that is because law enforcement responded in the way that they did, and as rapidly and succinctly as they did. It also speaks to the way that social media allowed the word to get out faster, even though Facebook did wind up disabling the live stream. But we cannot sit back and ignore a pattern that we have seen over and over and over again, whether it was in 1993 with the initial World Trade Center bombing, 9/11, the Pulse nightclub shooting, Farouk and Tashin Malik in Santa Bernardino, California, when they did that shooting. This whole thing relates to what the mainstream would have us believe is the religion of peace. It relates to the same nonsense that plays out repeatedly over and over and over again without end. We can't forget the Fort Hood shooting with Major Nidal Hassan. We can't forget the shooting that happened at the recruiting centers back in 2015. There needs to be a stringent condemnation of Islamofascism, because it is still there, it is still threatening us on a day-to-day basis, and with wokeism and with political correctness and with all of that nonsense that exists, we've been burying our heads in the sand and allowing these things to continue without end and without respite. And the longer that we continue to ignore this, and the longer that we continue to pretend as though there is not a problem with this, the worse the situation will be. At least, and thank God for it, nobody but the suspect himself was killed. Thank God this one turned out for the best, because that does not usually happen to be the case. In fact, rarely ever does it happen to be the case. So, I'm eternally grateful that it did turn out in a good way and with a happy ending. But yes, I do think we need to address this problem. And I think that we need to hold government officials accountable for the leniency that has allowed this sort of nonsense to continue. But I am happy that it ended the way that it did. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for choosing to fly with us. I hope to see you again next time. Please do